The legendary figure of Ragnar Lothbrok is a shadow that stretches across centuries of European history, a man who exists in the flickering grey space between verified historical record and mythic Viking saga. To understand the real Ragnar, we must first look to the oral traditions of the North, where his story was sung by poets and skalds long before it was ever written on parchment. The Vikings of the 9th century did not write books about their heroes. Instead, they passed down their history through complex poems and sagas that were shared around communal fires during the long, dark winters of Scandinavia. The primary sources for his life emerged hundreds of years later, including the 13th century Icelandic work known as Ragnar's Saga Lothbrokar, the tale of Ragnar Sons, and the Latin Gesta Danorum, composed by the Danish historian Saxo Grammaticus in the 12th century. These texts present a man of immense stature and noble birth, far removed from the humble farmer often portrayed in modern television. The origins of the hairy breeches. According to these ancient legends, Ragnar was the son of Sigurd Snake-in-the-Eye, a legendary king who purportedly ruled over both Sweden and Denmark, while popular culture often roots him in the fjords of Norway. The primary sagas place his ancestry and seat of power in upland Sweden. His famous nickname, Lothbrok, translates from Old Norse as hairy breeches or shaggy breeches, a title he earned through a feat of great bravery and ingenuity. The legend states that a jarl named Harald once gave his beautiful daughter, Thora Borgajart, a small serpent as a gift. As the creature grew into a massive Lindorm, it encircled her bower and prevented anyone from approaching. Ragnar accepted the challenge to slay the beast, but he knew he needed protection from its venomous breath and deadly bites. He fashioned a set of trousers and a cloak from shaggy animal skins, which he then boiled in pitch and rolled in sand to create a primitive form of hardened armor. Clad in these shaggy breeches, Ragnar was able to withstand the serpent's attacks, slaying the creature and winning the princess's hand in marriage. The romantic history of Ragnar Lothbrok is as complex as his military conquests, involving 3 distinct women who shaped his destiny. His first wife, according to the accounts of Saxo Grammaticus, was the fierce shield maiden Lagertha. She was a woman of immense courage who fought alongside Ragnar during his campaign in Norway to avenge his grandfather. Saxo describes her as having the spirit of a man in the body of a woman, a warrior who charged into the front lines of the shield wall with her long hair tucked back. However, the historical reality of Lagertha is debated among scholars, with some suggesting she was a personification of the Valkyries or a local Norwegian deity adapted into the Ragnar cycle. Following his marriage to Thora Borgajart, who eventually died of illness, Ragnar met his most famous wife, Aslog, also known as Kraukar. She was said to be the daughter of the legendary dragon slayer, Sigurd Fafnspane, and the shield maiden Brynhilda. To protect her from her parents' enemies, she was raised in poverty by a couple who disguised her beauty by keeping her in rags and calling her Crow. Ragnar discovered Aslog when his men saw her bathing and were so distracted by her beauty that they burned the bread they were baking. Seeking to test her intelligence, Ragnar sent a riddle, demanding she come to him neither dressed nor undressed, neither hungry nor full, and neither alone nor with company. Aslaug appeared, wearing only a fishnet, biting into a leek and accompanied by a dog, satisfying every condition of the riddle. Ragnar was so impressed by her wit that he married her, and she became the mother of the warriors who would eventually define the Viking Age. The historical siege of Paris, 845 AD. While the sagas are filled with mythic detail, the strongest evidence for a historical man named Ragnar comes from the Frankish and Anglo-Saxon chronicles of the mid-9th century. These records speak of a terrifying Viking chieftain named Ragnar or Ragnar, who led a massive fleet up the Seine River in the year 845. This was not a minor raid, but a full-scale invasion involving 120 ships and over 5,000 warriors. The target was Paris, the jewel of West Francia. King Charles the Bald attempted to defend the city by dividing his army along both banks of the Seine, a strategic error that allowed Ragnar to isolate and overwhelm one half of the Frankish forces. To terrify the remaining defenders, the Vikings executed 111 prisoners by hanging them on an island in full view of the Frankish camp, presenting them as a sacrifice to the god Odin. The psychological impact of this slaughter forced the Frankish army to retreat, and Ragnar's forces occupied Paris on Easter Sunday, March 29th, 845. They plundered the city, but their victory was short-lived as a devastating, plague-like dysentery broke out in their camp. Desperate to save his kingdom, Charles the Bald offered a staggering ransom of 7,000 livres of silver and gold for the Vikings to depart. This was the first recorded payment of Danegeld, a practice of buying off Viking raiders that would become common in the decades to follow. Ragnar eventually returned to the court of King Horik I of Denmark, but Frankish sources claim he died soon after from the same plague that had ravaged his army in Paris. The legacy of the sons. Despite the uncertainty surrounding Ragnar's own life, the historical existence of his sons is widely accepted by modern historians. These men, who claimed Ragnar Lothbrok as their father, were the primary leaders of the Viking Age's most significant movements. Björn Ironside was a verified Viking leader who raided deep into the Mediterranean, reaching as far as North Africa and Italy. In Sweden, he is traditionally viewed as the progenitor of the Munch dynasty of kings. Ivar the Boneless, described in Irish and English records as Imar or Ingvar, was a strategic mastermind who commanded the Viking forces during their conquest of England. Sigurd Snake-in-the-Eye became a king of Denmark and was said to have been born with the image of a serpent biting its own tail in his pupil. Oban Halfdan are clearly documented in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle as senior commanders of the Great Heathen Army. The fact that such powerful, historically verified men all identified as the progeny of Ragnar is perhaps the most compelling argument that a real Ragnar existed, even if his deeds were later exaggerated by poets. The Snake Pit and the Great Heathen Army. The legend of Ragnar's death remains one of the most enduring stories of the North. The sagas claim that, in his old age, Ragnar became restless and sought to prove he was still the greatest warrior of his time. He attempted to conquer England with only 2 ships, a feat that led to his shipwreck on the coast of Northumbria. He was captured by King Glar, who did not initially realize the identity of his high-status prisoner. When Ragnar refused to answer the king's questions, Glar ordered him to be thrown into a pit of poisonous snakes. As he lay dying from the venomous bites, Ragnar began to sing his final death song, the Krakumal, in which he boasted of his many victories and looked forward to the drinking halls of Valhalla. It was there that he uttered his famous warning to King Glar, how the little piglets would grunt if they knew what the old boar suffers. This warning proved prophetic when Ragnar's sons learnt of his execution. In 865 AD, they assembled the great heathen army, a force unlike any raid seen before. Led by Ivar the Boneless, Halfdan, and Erb, this was an army focused on conquest and revenge. They landed in East Anglia, took the city of York in 867, and eventually captured King Glar himself. According to the sagas, the sons of Ragnar exacted their revenge through the ritual of the blood. Egila, a gruesome execution where the victims' ribs were separated from the spine and their lungs pulled through the opening to resemble wings. Whether the blood eagle was a historical reality or a later literary invention remains a subject of debate. But there is no doubt that Glir died, and the sons of Ragnar went on to conquer much of England. Fact versus fiction. The composite hero. Ultimately, historians are divided on whether Ragnar Lothbrok was a single person or a composite of several different leaders. One theory suggests that 12th century authors took the disparate deeds of men like Regin Harush the Raider, King Horik I, and an Irish Viking king named Ragnar to create a single unified hero for the Viking Age. By providing a common, legendary father for famous leaders like Ivar and Björn, these stories may have served to legitimize the power of their descendants. Another theory holds that a single charismatic chieftain did indeed exist, rising to such fame that his life became an inseparable blend of fact and fiction even before he died. He was likely a minor king or chieftain in Denmark or Sweden, who participated in the early raids of the 9th century, setting the stage for the massive invasions led by his sons. Regardless of his biological reality, the name Ragnar Lothbrok became a rallying cry that defined the expansion of the Norse people across the Western world. His legacy is found in the dynasties he supposedly founded and the impact of the sons who fought in his name. He remains the quintessential symbol of the Viking spirit, representing the ambition to see beyond the known horizon and the desire to leave, a name that would be remembered for 1,000 years. The historical context of the 9th century. To appreciate the true story of Ragnar, one must understand the world he inhabited. The 9th century was a time of shifting borders and nascent kingdoms. In Scandinavia, the transition from local tribal chieftains to centralized kings was beginning. In Western Europe, the Carolingian Empire was fracturing after the death of Charlemagne, leaving it vulnerable to external threats. This was the vacuum that Ragnar and his contemporaries filled. Their longships were technological marvels of the age, allowing them to strike deep inland via river systems like the Seine and the Thames. The real Ragnar was a product of this environment, a master of hit-and-run tactics, psychological warfare, and political extortion. His raid on Paris was not just an act of violence, but a calculated business transaction. By hanging his prisoners, he ensured he would not have to fight a long, drawn-out battle. He merely had to wait for the enemy's resolve to crumble. This pragmatism was the hallmark of the Viking Age leaders. In the end, whether Ragnar was a man or a myth matters less than the undeniable reality of the fires he lit. From the sack of Paris to the creation of the Danelor in England, the events attributed to Ragnar and his sons changed the course of European history forever. The old Boar may have died in a snake pit, but his piglets ensured that the world would never forget the name Lothbrok. The legacy in modern memory. Centuries later, Ragnar continues to evolve. In the medieval sagas, he was a hero of chivalry and fate. In the 19th century, he was a romantic symbol of northern nationalism. Today, through global media, he has become a symbol of the underdog, the visionary who looked west and saw a different future for his people. While the real Ragnar likely never met a shield maiden like the Lagertha of television or navigated with sunstones, the core of his story, the rise from obscurity to legendary status through sheer force of will, remains a powerful narrative. He represents the moment Scandinavia stepped out of the shadows of the North and onto the stage of world history. Through the work of historians and archaeologists, we continue to peel back the layers of myth, finding beneath the shaggy breeches a real history of exploration, conflict, and the birth of nations. The legacy of Ragnar Lothbrok is not merely a collection of stories about raids and kings. It is the cornerstone of the Viking Age itself. He stands as the bridge between the old world of isolated tribes and the new world of global exploration. Whether he was a single man or a personification of the Norse spirit, the old Boar ensured that the echoes of his life would never truly fall into the nihilistic void. His sons carried his name from the shores of England to the gates of the Mediterranean, building empires out of the wreckage of the old order. As we peel back the layers of shaggy animal skins and mythic serpents, we find a truth more compelling than any fiction. A history of a people who refuse to be forgotten. The story of Ragnar is our story, a search for the unheard, a battle against the cold, and a relentless drive to leave a mark on the stone-cracked face of history. The fires of the Midgard Archives never truly dim, but the shadows of the North are vast. To ensure you never lose your way in the whiteout silence, join our circle of watchers. Subscribe, keep your hearthfire shield burning, and be the first to hear when a new entry is unearthed from the frost. Like and comment, share your thoughts to help keep these memories from being integrated into the landscape of the forgotten. Stay in the light.